Iqbal Hasnain, an Indian glaciologist, writer, educationalist, and chairman of Glacier and Climate Change Commission of Government of Sikkim. He is a former Vice Chancellor of University of Calicut and a member of United Nations Environment Program Committee on Global Assessment of Black Carbon and Troposphere Ozone. He has served at Jawaharlal Nehru University as a professor of glaciology. Without further ado, I will welcome Professor Syed Iqbal Hasnain to talk on climate change. Please.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Abbas, for very generous introduction. First, I would like to start the story from the Paris Agreement, which is, the COP28 held in Paris in 2015, and that attended by 196 countries. And one of the most important decisions was taken that the global temperature, what we call popularly the Paris Agreement, to 1.5 degrees Celsius. And then they asked all the countries around the world, whether they are the emitters or non-emitters, to go ahead and do something to change the footprints of the carbon in their own countries. So the three major country, the climate change, every country has agreed that by 2050 they will reduce and bring the emission to net zero. So in that, the European countries, European Union countries, the North American, particularly the United States of America, China, and India. But recently, about a couple of months back, a sixth report was released by IPCC. As all you know, that International Panel on Climate Change regularly issue the assessment or synthesis report. So it is based on the scientific evidence. They synthesize the report, synthesize the data, and bring out the report. So that report is very alarming, and they said that already the global temperature has reached 1.1 degrees Celsius, and by 2030 it will be more than 1.5 degrees Celsius. And the reason why the people or the countries involved, particularly the three major polluters, America, China, and India, are not doing much in this regard. And of course, the lesser one, the European Union, Indonesia, and some other countries. So everybody will be surprised to know that the China is still continuing with the coal-fired power plants, which is a big polluters, and similarly India is also doing it. America has reduced some of the coal power plants, and they have gone for the drilling of oil in the Alaska and other regions. So it is very difficult to bring down the temperature before 2030. So it is just impossible. So if one has to keep the temperature under 1.5 degrees Celsius or 2 degrees Celsius, then the world must not emit more than 500 billion tons CO2 after 2020. Presumably global emission amount to 59 billion tons. So already we are producing so much carbon that is just impossible to contain the global temperature to 1.5 degrees Celsius, and more it has to go beyond 2 degrees Celsius. So in the 27th COP, which was held in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt, it was decided by many countries, especially the poor countries. They asked for the resilience, what they call it, the resilience kind of a climate resistance fund. but it was not operationalized. It has to be in billions of dollars. So it will be operationalized in COP28, which will be held in coming November in Dubai. So it is everything is wide open, and nothing has been fixed globally. So the 1.5 degrees Celsius equivalent to 2.7 Fahrenheit. So most likely all the predictions are there by the scientists that it will rise by before 2035 as the humans burn coal, oil, and industrial gas. So under the 25 Paris Agreement, virtually every nation has agreed to pursue effort to hold global warming, means global temperature, and doing alternative energy sources. But the alternative energy sources are not enough to compensate the amount of energy required for the development of the country, particularly in China and India. So that is a big question mark on that. And they said that we'll go to the net zero by 2030. So there is no question of going to net zero, means there is no emission, no fossil fuel emissions by that time. And the USA has agreed to do it by 2050, China 2060, and India 2070. But it is a big and tall claim, and nobody is going to achieve that. So that is the scenario at the present. Yeah.
Yeah, great. All these things, especially the history of those conferences. Yeah. So I'm wondering, how will we hope, when it comes to the Dubai or UAE, when UAE hosting COP28?
Yeah, it is an interesting situation that the UAE is one of the largest producers of the fossil fuels or the petroleum products, and that is contributing a lot. So they have taken a concert decision to host in Dubai the 28th COP, and in that there are two. I think one of the two major issues which will be figured. One is about the operationalizing the resistance fund, because the smaller countries, which they say they are not contributing anything for the climate change, and they are equally suffering. And now you have seen how the floods are affecting Somalia, Sudan, and so many other countries, Pakistan and other poorer countries, which have not contributed much to the global climate temperature, and they are requesting that they should be provided some international funding to start particularly these alternative sources of energy, just like your solar power, wind power, and nuclear power is also one of the important agenda. Especially now you have seen that European countries have stopped producing on nuclear power, but now recently I checked a report. I checked on one report on France. France is making many new nuclear power plants. Similarly, the Germany, which is stopped, they are also doing the many nuclear power plants. India is also trying. So many countries are going for the nuclear power, which is much cleaner energy, but they have their own risk in that. And it happened in the past when some leakages happened in Russia, the former Russia. Now it is in Ukraine, and that we see the devastating result of that. So these are the major concerns. And another concern I think it is an important issue to be taken. So we had a meeting in February in Abu Dhabi, the Educators Without Borders. And one of the agendas of the Educators Without Borders, how the children's education is affected in these poorer, marginalized communities. And we have seen that when the floods are there, whether they are in California, floods were there in Sudan, floods were there in India, floods were there in Pakistan. So the advanced countries bring back the basic education again after repairing their schools and all that. But even poorer countries like Sudan, Somalia, Pakistan, and so many other countries, they are unable So most of the children, because of the climatic impact, go out of the education system, and education is the main thing for the new generation. So what is going to be happening, that's what I'm calling them, the invisible refugees. So if you have a refugees by the political persecution or the religious persecution, the United Nations recognizes them, but they don't recognize them as refugees. They're impacted by the climate change. So that's what we thought, that we should have a side event in the COP28 at Dubai and articulate about these invisible refugees, and they should be recognized by the United Nations. Because when the United Nations recognizes the refugee status, they provide their shelter, their food, and other things. And recently we saw that how from Sudan, the fight is going on between two warlords kind of a thing. And the people are going to Chad, Egypt, and Saudi, and they are provided help by the United Nations. So similar provision should be made in the United Nations Charter about the climate change refugees, which we call them invisible refugees. Okay?
Yeah, it's a great suggestion. I think it will be taken over by them. And also, I'm wondering, what will be the take of, NGOs and other organizations when it comes to the climate change?
You have rightly said the NGO's role is very important, because everywhere the government machine, they cannot reach out. So the NGOs play a very crucial role in educating how whether they are religious NGOs or they are social NGOs, they have to educate the communities about the consequences of the climate change and tell them. Say, for example, I'll give you a very good example from the United States. ISNA. ISNA is the Islamic Society of North America. It holds every year a conference. It is actually, the membership is open to Canadian and those who Muslim communities live in Canada and America. And I was surprised. I attended one of the meetings in Washington, D.C. some 7 years back, and it was attended by 6,000, 7,000 people. So in these kind of a gathering, annual gathering of a faith gathering, they should also have a session on the climate change, but they don't have. So whether it is the Christian faith or the Muslim faith or other faith or Jewish faith, they should bring it to that religious conclave about the dangers of the climate change. All humanity is facing globally, and we have to fight it together.
Yeah, when we take to the schools and colleges, how is your suggestion, to bring it the part of curriculum, or how do we just make it part of the life?
Yeah, what happening that those who are the advanced countries or advanced economies or the middle level economies, so they have their climate change impact in their curriculum. But in the poorer countries, they may not have there, but they are the people who are suffering because of that impact. Because if the floods are there, heat waves here, the droughts are there, so the lot of the people migrate from one place to other places, and the education is suffered, especially the early education. I'm not talking about the college education, but the early education, the children between up to the 8 standard or 10 standard go out of the school. So we have to have some kind of a plan, or at least we have to have a database on these things, how the people are affected by the climate change and how they are affected by the poverty. Poverty is also the part of that. So those who are the poorer are most vulnerable to the climate change impact. So these are things. And now we have seen that there is a huge flood in California. So they've taken within their strides, and they repaired everything within a month, and the children gone back to their school. Look at the Pakistan and other poorer countries. They could not do anything, and then still the children out of the schools. So it is all related to the economic reasons. Economic factors always play an important role. But here, the climate change is not discriminating between rich and poor, but they are affecting both. And we have seen globally how the Americans are affected by floods and fires, and similarly, if this impact is there in a poorer country, then it is. We have seen it in France last summer. How much is the heat wave? But they have come back. But here, if it is happened in a country like South Asia or East Asia, that is very difficult to recover from these disasters. So we have to have a kind of a more awareness. More chapters has to be created in the school curriculum about the impact of the climate change, because the impact of the climate change is not only the temperature rise, it is also affected on the food security also, how the food is affected. And now the growing global population is require more and more food. So how it will be affected? So these are all related things, which has, and many places, even the tourism affected because of the high temperature and other things. So all these related things has to be brought into one in the curriculum and taught to the students. And of course, another important factor is that these children may be aware about that, but the decision maker, the policy makers of each country has to take a tough call on that, and then they have to bring some measures that to reduce the carbon footprints. And for example, if you have a more carbon footprint by the other countries, the Maldives the islands will be affected by the sea level rise. They have nothing to do because there is hardly any industry or car. They are simply, but so these are the major challenges the global community is facing at this 21st century.
Any new agenda to suggest for the policymakers in this context?
Yeah, we are already talking to many people around the globally, maybe in Americans and our friends, that we want in the COP28 at Dubai, which will be held in the coming November, that we should have one day session on the invisible refugees, the refugees which are affected by the climate disasters, another on the glaciers, because especially in the South Asia and Himalayan glaciers, which are feeding to Pakistan, China, India, and so many huge populations are there. More than 1.2 billion people are there already in India, and similarly in Pakistan and all that. So you see the glaciers are melting fast, whether Antarctican glaciers or the Arctic glaciers or the glaciers from Alaska. Globally, you see all the glaciers are melting. And we have seen in Switzerland that most of the skiing resorts have closed down because there is no ice on them. So that is the kind of a economic impact many communities are facing globally in a different way. Say the impact not on the food security of the Swiss people, but on their earnings it is a big industry there. The skiing industry is a very huge industry, and if they don't get a proper snow at the right time, so it is not solid snow on which skiing can be done. So all these are impacting, and similarly, the glaciers are melting in the Himalayan. They are affecting our river system, the water resources, and sometimes the more water comes because of the extreme events of the rainfall. And the Pakistan is a good example, where there is a glacier melt plus, and then everything is gone underwater. So these are the concerns, and a huge concern. So one important thing is that climate change is a reality, and it should be taken seriously. It is not a myth. Many of the communities, many people in many countries think that is not a real. We have a scientific proof, and it is the reality, and this has to be tackled. And this is affecting the global community in different ways. Every day you hear on the television report that this, now I saw the Somalia. Somalia is a dry land country, and now they have a huge disaster. Similarly in South America, and many places we have to see in the coming months and years together.
Yeah, great to hear that. And also, you have been doing research on glaciers and how it will be important to other countries. Some people think that glaciers won't be affecting others because they are far away from these kind of scenarios. from your study. Could you explain those things?
Yeah, thank you for asking this question. The glaciers have a different role in different parts of the world. As I said that in the South Asian countries like India, Pakistan, Bhutan, Nepal, China, especially in the northern part of the China, it is affecting their water resources. It is an important element of the water resource because it holds the water and it releases the water when we need it. So there is a kind of a balance is there. So when the mass of the glacier, when the mass of the ice is reduced, so naturally it's no more a sustainable water resource element into the hydrologic cycle. That is also a very important part. But if you see in Alaska, it has a different role. It has a role for giving the water to their lake system, to their ecosystem. Similarly, in the Switzerland, as I explained, that is an important part where they have a skiing in the higher elevations where the glaciers are also there. So all these as a sport, as a utility of the water resources, so it has a meaning in many parts differently, you have to see. But it is an important part of the hydrological system. It is a permanent part of the hydrological system which changes with the time. There was ice ages, you must have heard, people must have heard. If you visit England, you see the lakes are there, Yorkshire and other places. They were the left out of the last ice ages. When the ice is retreated, the lakes are remained there. So it is a kind of a modulating kind of an system which is affecting the earth right from the day one. So now we are beneficiary, but we live in a different time. Maybe those who are living in the earlier time, they must have seen more cold winters and all that. And now you see the different kind of element. Now we see the glacier sizes and their mass is reduced all over, even in Alaska and even in Antarctica. You see that Antarctic ice sheet is also breaking up, and if that happens, then it will increase the global ice. And not only that, the sea level is increased by adding the more water. There is a warming of the sea also. So the sea level rises not because of you add up more water into it by ice sheets or other glacier melt, but because of the warming. So the global warming, heat of the water and the water level goes up. And many places I have seen that even in Kerala, I saw some last couple of months back, I was in the coastal line. So the sea is eroding the inner land. So what is happening because the sea level is rising and that eroding the beaches. So many places they have to remove the villages from the coastal areas. So that is happening, but is not well reported by the media. And something very big disasters happen, they report it. Otherwise, just they forget about it. But it is happening in many parts of the world.
Yeah. Yeah, this time, UAE is boldly taking this action and they are leading this summit in Dubai. So I hope that the Muslim Community Council will have a take on that, especially take to the other communities around the world who are affiliated to these. And do you have any suggestion on that?
Yeah, I have a suggestion for the Muslim, the community, that wherever you have a big conclaves of the Muslims, communities in America or Europe, always bring a session on the climate change. What is going on? Bring some expert and explain to that faith people that this is going on and we have to have a responsibility from that. And ISNA is a big example. And I hope that they will talk to the ISNA leadership. And I think in the coming September, they have a conclave in Chicago, and they should include in their agenda about the climate change and have a session. They have a session on marriages, they have on cultural, so many things. Why don't they have it now about the climate change impact on the humanities globally?
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us.
All the good.
Especially
good to talk to you.
Yeah, UAE has taken a lot of measures. It has now atomic energy, and they are doing a lot on this. And hope we can do our more discussions and effective measures on this.
UAE has done about the solar parks and all that. They are changing, and they have done a good job on solar parks in Abu Dhabi. Yeah, I heard about that. I have not seen, but it is a good initiative. And similarly, I read it in other countries. It's happening in the Middle East.
Yeah,
okay.
Thank you so much for joining us, and I hope we will have sessions and interactive these kind of events, especially in UAE before that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate for having me. Thank you.